Hi, this is Tim Mackesy from Atlanta, Georgia. This podcast is dedicated to the concept of breathing. How do human beings breathe? Do I need to breathe before I talk? If I stutter, should I stop and take a breath? Do people who stutter have a breathing problem? It sure gets a lot of attention. Is it possible that breathing is the least understood and most over-treated concept inside speech pathology for people who stutter? It very well may be. It's the year 2020, and a lot of programs put breathing right in a priority of stuttering treatment. This podcast is a complement to a new video that will be on YouTube. If you just search my name, Tim Mackesy, under YouTube, you will find the video appearing here in May of 2020 that will explain differently about this concept of breathing. Right now, place your hand flat on your chest and count out loud to 5 without breathing. Just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's very easy. If you did it right, you just proved that you can say 5 words without taking a breath. We're going to cover science in this podcast and also how breathing plays out within the person who stutters. What if I told you one of the biggest myths in stuttering treatment is that a human being has to take a breath before they talk? Another big myth is if you begin to stutter, you should stop and take a breath. Many programs worldwide are predicated on the perceived need to breathe before talking or stop stuttering and take a breath. Both the concept of you need to take a breath to talk and the concept of stopping a stutter and taking a breath are both false. Both contribute to symptoms and severity. I'll explain further. Right now, count from 1 to 10. We put our hand flat on our chest. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So now it's 10 words. Further evidence, you can say 10 words without taking a breath. So why are we told, take a breath? How do people breathe? It's called the diaphragm. The diaphragm is a sheet of muscle, the bottom of the lungs. It pushes down and air gets pulled in by negative pressure. Many people in science class as children took a big Coke bottle and put a sheet of plastic under it that stretches to learn how the diaphragm works. It's interesting, a lot of fine motor skill activities like archery are performed as you exhale. So the archer lines up the arrow with the target, they pull back, and just before they release, they start a gentle exhalation. Even billiards, you line up your shot, a finesse shot, and you begin to exhale gently as you execute. So across precision activities, the motor movements are done in unison with an exhalation. If you hold your breath when you shoot an arrow or many other activities, your muscle groups tighten and you can't possibly execute well. So you might ask, how can I possibly begin talking without a breath? I'm still doubting this. It's something called PEEP, positive end expiratory pressure. PEEP is what's holding your lungs open right now as you listen. Otherwise, your lungs would be like 2 empty sacks or bags or balloons. But PEEP as holding my lungs open and holding your lungs open too. Providing this resource of enough air to start my utterance. So that's how a human being can begin to say a few words without taking a breath. We have to understand what it's like to be a person who stutters. I had a severe stutter through undergraduate school. I feared stuttering. I avoided. When I was called to read out loud, it was particularly scary for me. So let's understand social anxiety, panic, fear, anticipating stuttering. In the year 2014, the American Psychological Association upgraded the DSM-4 to the DSM-5. They changed the word stuttering to childhood fluency disorder. And they really started to talk about how anxiety and avoidance are parts of what we know as stuttering or blocking or stammering if you live in London and some other spots in the world. Social anxiety, the fear of stuttering. If you go on to Reddit, for example, with more than 7,000 members, you start reading about people's fear of stuttering. Job interviews, meeting their girlfriend's parents, being asked to read in a wedding. Should I go back to law school if I stutter? A lot of this is a fear of stuttering. We have to be honest here. So when I fear stuttering, how does it play out in my body? What does it do to my breathing? When we perceive danger, don't stutter. I don't want to stutter. I don't want someone to find out I stutter. When we perceive danger, the amygdala in our brain signals the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is a command center. It sends a message that can change our blood pressure, our breathing, as we enter the fight or flight response, the panic. Remember, during fight or flight, your diaphragm tightens and blood leaves for your extremities to either take flight or fight. So let's pretend you're afraid of big dogs. And you look about 3 yards down the street and there's a large dog. You can't tell if that dog is secured or not. At that moment, you have a choice. Continue walking and prepare for fight. I'm going to kick it if it comes in the street. Or flight. Honey, let's turn around and walk the other way. That dog scares me. Fight or flight. So a person who stutters can perceive danger. Don't stutter. They're going to find out I stutter. The diaphragm tightens, blood leaves for the extremities. It creates the fight or flight or panic reaction. During panic, we breathe high in the chest, which is absolutely the worst kind of breath for talking and for stuttering. If the layperson sees someone stutter and block and force, they might say, take a breath. And that child is very concrete. They're going to take the breath high in the chest, similar to if you see them in the pool and they're going to go underwater. They take that and they go underwater. So if I'm stuttering and someone says, take a breath, I've just filled up my oropharynx, my mouth, my oral cavity, fancy name, with air. Then I start the word, and I create a huge stutter. So telling me to take a breath during my stutter is a mistake. Somebody might say, well, but if I have a big stutter, I have to take a breath. Watch my video. I hold a stutter for 11 seconds, and then I release it on an exhale, showing again that taking a breath during a stutter is unnecessary and actually is a mistake. Now, some people who are listening who are very hardcore about breathing, they're even evangelical about breathing. breathing is absolute key to their therapy program somewhere here in the world. And they're going to say something like this. Okay, I hear you talking, but I tell people to take a breath, then relax, then stretch the syllable, then use amplitude contour, then a light contact, stretch your words, easy speech, and it could be up to 7 steps. Why saddle somebody with 7 steps when they're unnecessary? Now, I want to respect anyone listening to this who went to a program where breathing was a key component to the program, and that person's done well with their speech. They're very happy with how they talk. I want to respect that person. I also want to point out, if you look at baseball, you have unorthodox players. Either their pitching style, their wind-up, their delivery are unorthodox, but they make it work. In golf, there's several different putting grips and putting strokes. Long putters, short putters. Some of them are unorthodox, but they make it work. But there's also best practices. In sports, everyone now is being videoed. They video the golf swing. And so there's what's called best practices. And you're seeing more and more pro golfers conform to basically the same swing. So there are people who were taught to take a breath, and somehow they worked it out. Over time, they probably abandoned the deep breath target and figured out the rest of their stuttering. And one of the biggest things anyone with that success did was gradually eliminate their anxiety about stuttering, begin to self-disclose, talk about their stuttering, maybe join a support group, and dial down the whole phenomenon of stuttering. If breathing is not necessary, and we proved it, then why teach it? If you understand the moment of a block or stutter, you would never say, take a breath. So what if I'm called on in class to talk? If a teacher points to me and calls my name, I'm going to start talking as I exhale. If I have to read out loud, I'm going to use what's called phrasing, break the words into groups, and I'm going to initiate the first word in unison with an exhalation. I am not going to take a deep breath before I read because I don't need to, and I understand blocking and stuttering. On the video on YouTube, there's also a link to a young man named Parks Kaiser who was taught for years to take a deep breath, therapist after therapist. And you're going to see, when I met him, his tendency to take a deep breath and block, and how breathing made it worse instead of better. And you'll get to see me work with him in the mirror and some other things that we were doing together. There is no evidence that people who stutter have a breathing problem. No research, no evidence that people who stutter have a breathing problem. When they're relaxed and chillax, their breathing's just fine. At the moment of the stutter, or the fear of a stutter coming, the person who stutters can panic and disrupt breathing, interrupt it, discoordinate it, and begin to stutter and mess up their breathing. But they don't have a breathing problem. That's why breathing may be one of the most over-treated things within stuttering. So in conclusion, a human being can start talking as they exhale because of something in their body called PEEP, positive end expiratory pressure. You can just start talking as you exhale. If you begin to stutter, it's better to release the stutter on an exhale. Because if you take a breath right in the middle of panic, remember, it's going to be that high chest breath, and you're probably going to ignite more stuttering. Because breath and muscular tension are two ingredients to stuttering. So I hope as we go forward, year 2020 and beyond, that people who treat stuttering better understand breathing and reduce their demands on people who stutter on changing the way they breathe. Because in some cases, it makes the stuttering worse. Thank you very much for listening.